Now, I recognize that we've all had different experiences in the church growing up, and so you all may not necessarily relate to what I'm about to say, which is that the church that I attended as a teenager frequently introduced the offering during the service with the reminder that God loves a cheerful giver. The church I attended as a teenager, the pastor used to love to say that before the offering. And I always wonder, does contrapositive prove the rule? Does God loathe a miserable giver? Will the beatings continue until morale improves? You will give to the church and you are going to be cheerful about it. God loves a cheerful giver. That is one of those phrases that gets tossed around quite a bit, and it is sort of a quote that Paul is implying in the book of 2 Corinthians. I say it's sort of a quote because it is a quote from Proverbs 22, but it isn't actually in the Bibles that are in your pews. And what I mean by that is not a quote from Proverbs 22 in the Hebrew Bible. It is a quote from Proverbs 22 in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation, the Koine Greek translation of a Hebrew textual tradition that often includes the same texts that are in the version of the Bible that we have, but not always. Paul and his contemporaries would have been very familiar with the Septuagint. Paul would have been someone who knew how to speak and to write in Greek and would have quoted from the Septuagint quite easily, no doubt. Many of his contemporaries would as well, and so now he is writing a letter to a church community that we assume he has some familiarity with. And when he writes a letter, he doesn't feel the need to write in under the rules of academic engagement. He doesn't offer footnotes. He doesn't cite his sources. And so he offers a loose version of Proverbs 22:8. God loves a cheerful giver. The original quote was, God blesses a happy and generous person. Paul would have felt that that quote was close enough. God loves a cheerful giver because he is explaining that giving with cheer is to be contrasted with self-concerned or forced giving. We all know it provides us very little joy to be trapped into giving something to a cause for which we care little about or for which we feel we have been manipulated into, right? That's fairly obvious. On the other hand, freely giving or giving in secret freely can lead to a different understanding of what life can be. Surely I do not think this is breaking news for many of you. Giving freely and giving in secret, if that is something to be considered a virtue, why don't more of us do it? One of the people that I admire greatly is now in his mid-80s, businessman Chuck Feeney. He lives in San Francisco now. Chuck was the founder of Atlantic Philanthropies. Chuck made an absolute fortune through the duty-free business many years ago. He is a hero to Warren Buffett and Bill and Melinda Gates, who almost managed to give away billions of dollars without anyone knowing about it. He was outed during a business dispute, and so his name appeared in court documents. Otherwise, nobody would have ever known who the founder and primary donor toward Atlantic Philanthropies ever was. There are no names with Chuck Feeney that are chiseled in marble. He was famous for eating hamburgers at Tommy Macken's on 57th Street, a place that is now gone. Feeney's most widely regarded quote is one that I enjoy greatly. You can only wear one pair of pants at a time. Yes. You can have billions of dollars, and how many pairs will you wear? But you can wear only one pair of pants at a time, and of course still be miserable. There will always be exceptions to the rule. Yes, you can give away more than 10% of your income and be miserable, and you can give nothing away and be quite content. But generally, and in a statistically significant way, the more people give of their time and their money, not just in absolute terms, but as percentages of the total that they have the ability to give, the happier they are. This is cited in a book called The Paradox of Generosity by Smith and Davidson, a book you can find in our own Union Library, which is dedicated to Gene Kunis. The subtitle of the book, Giving We Receive, Grasping We Lose, offers us our own version of Chuck Feeney, quiet, loving, kind, and mostly hidden. That was Gene Kunis. Many of you know that Union received a significant sum from Gene's estate several months ago. Last year, your leadership council considered several different options for how to best employ Gene's gift in the service of our ministry, and ultimately a slowly approach was taken, because you all have to help. But more than that, we also have to ask ourselves some very important questions. Are we, as individuals, doing charity in the best or the most effective or faithful or least toxic fashion that we can? Are we, as a congregation, helping in the ways that we intend? Are we living out our passions? Are we responding to the world with health and with vitality, with love and with generosity? Is it a good time to ask right now, can we do this any better? It's always good to ask that question, but it's a challenge to ask that question in a congregational church with all of our opinions. Betty Bailey used to be on staff, and that elicited a chuckle from her. I don't know if you've noticed, there is an opinion or two floating around these halls, Betty. Have you noticed that during your time here? Gene Kunis' gift is, of course, financial. But perhaps her greatest gift was helping us to stop and ask if we want to make any changes right now to both honor her, but also to honor our neighbors. Are we doing right by ourselves and by others? In what ways are we loving our neighbors? In what ways are you, in fact, becoming a generous person? In what ways does it feel like you've taken a sense of blessing and been able to push that back out beyond yourself and into the world? Jesus talks about giving and fasting and prayer in the 6th chapter of Matthew, but in a way that we might not, because he does not exhort the listener to do these things, but rather offers guidance on how to do those things. Don't let a trumpet sound before you, he says. Don't let one hand know what the other is doing. How it is done is, at the very least, as important as actually doing it. Jesus is encouraging you and I and the disciples Jesus is encouraging you and I and the disciples to remember that God alone is God. How quickly we sometimes can forget that we didn't make the resources to make the alms giving possible in the first place. Even if we believe that there is nobody else quite like us, nobody else could ever have done quite what we did, that we really are different from everybody else, that we really didn't have others working with us, teaching us, guiding us, inspiring us, or pushing us. Do you really believe that your brilliance, all of your brilliance, has occurred in a vacuum? Yet Jesus' words come to us in a different time and place because Jesus is just assuming that everybody does these things, the fasting and the prayer and the alms giving. Even those with meager financial resources, that they will give alms in some capacity, that they will help their neighbor when they can. They will seek the common good when they can. And we have a tendency in the church to employ assumptions about how people behave in our society. We have all sorts of assumptions about who we are as Americans and as church-going Americans. We acknowledge that being a generous person tends to make one happier. Yes, you can give away 10% of your income and still be miserable. You could be generous with your time and loathe the compulsion you feel to offer that time, but it's usually not the case. A lack of time, personal resources, personal issues, a disconnect between the passions and volunteer opportunities may well contribute to the decision to not give of your time. But I was shocked by this. 76.4% of Americans average 0 volunteer hours a month. 76%. You give an hour at church, at school, for a kid's sports team, for brownies, for Boy Scouts, the list goes on. You're one of only 23.6% of American adults who do so. If you give blood, and lots of people can't, I do understand that, but less than 12% of American adults give blood in a year. 30%, almost 1 in 3 American adults say that they have never helped a relative or a friend with a job. They have never hit a nail with a hammer, they've never hung a door, they've never helped someone get ready for a dinner party. 42% of Americans have never watched somebody else's kid. Did you know that if you give more than 2% of your income away, that puts you in the top 15% of generous givers in the United States? We have created a narrative in our country that feeds on this idea that we are all enormously generous, and I recognize that many of you, of course, are. It's just that many of the people I interact with are enormously generous or want to be, and perhaps that's the important part, or want to be, but don't know how to start or where to start or with whom. Perhaps things fizzle quickly, and it's not a particular something, it's just that that's something that you try. Perhaps it doesn't make you instantly happy. And believe me, I understand that if you are told that in giving you are going to be happy or you are going to become a cheerful giver and God will love you for exhibiting all of that cheer, you can see why folks stop before they ever start. Because my experience in giving of my time and energy and resources is that it can be a headache, man. It can add stress to my life. It can make me tired by keeping me up at night. The people that I'm trying to help do not always thank me or acknowledge me for it. Does that sound familiar to anybody here? One of the important things I've done for myself to try and counteract that then is to create a personal mission statement that can be regularly revised. Creating a mission statement for yourself or for your family, and what a way to engage your children by creating a family mission statement that is also an affirmation of faith and therefore becomes something where you as a child of God recognize that as a core tenet of your faith that all people are children of God. It is then something of an inevitability that you will come to a place where faithful generosity is part of the purpose of life. It's what I think happens when I hear about someone like Chuck Feeney. I will never be Chuck Feeney. I will never give away billions of dollars. I may not articulate it this way when I hear about him, though, but Chuck Feeney, the reason why he is to be held up is because he makes me think, or helps me to think, what am I doing here anyway? June Kunis, her gift to us ought to help us think, what are we doing here anyway? No need for a sense of anguish. No need to beat ourselves up over sins of omission from another day. But really, with joy, what are we doing here? Because however you slice it, it all boils down to this, doesn't it? If I have received and I have been nurtured and I have been blessed and I have been loved, how do I want to reflect that nurturing, blessing, and love toward another? It isn't even that you have to have a great or deep or profound way of articulating this. It simply means that your life's purpose has something to do with something other than your own well-being. You might even say, does my life have a purpose? Well, other than loving other people and helping other people, no, not really. Because you can only wear one pair of pants at a time. It's not so much that God loves a cheerful giver as it is that when we give to God, when not under duress but out of joy, we tend to be, with exceptions and asterisks and parenthetical comments, more cheerful. We do need to critique and analyze the methods by which we give, but not the core motivation. Do you want to be happy? Do you want to be happy? In giving, we receive. But I'm not sure that's actually the right question. Do you want to be happy? Because in giving, there are headaches, and there are stressors, and there is a loss of sleep, and occasionally great distress at what is becoming of a person or situation we are seeking to help. Now, the only thing that seems to hold true is that in giving, we increase our capacity to experience that most elusive of God-given felt emotions. Joy. You can't choose joy. It doesn't fall in your lap. It comes to you in the most unexpected places and times. And if there is anything in life that I know to be true, it's this. When we grasp, when we hold tight, when we get stuck inside ourselves, when we can't get out of our own way, the gift of joy, the gift that God, the creator of the universe, gives to us remains elusive. Do you want to be happy? I'm not sure that's the right question. In giving, we learn and we receive. We receive love, we receive faith, hope, joy, purpose, direction, and connection. No, do I want to be happy is not quite right. The question for me today is, do I want to be alive? Peace be with you.